Hello, and welcome to the CMMC Compliance and Introduction. We are excited to have you here today, and this is a really great topic. A lot's coming out. This is a newer topic in 2020, but it's going to be an important topic coming forward, and so we're happy to just frame up what we have for you today. A few housekeeping rules, and then we'll dive right in. If you have any questions and you're watching this live, you can use the question box to type any question throughout this presentation. And if you're watching this on demand later, you can contact us and we'd be happy to follow up. So to dive right in, our speaker for today is Thomas Koch. He's my colleague and friend at BitLift Cybersecurity. He's the Chief Strategy Officer. He's got a very rich history in law. He actually has a law degree. And so he brings a really unique perspective on compliance, on legal. He's really tuned into the cybersecurity community. He's been in tech for many years. And he's going to help us navigate through this today and frame up for what will be a series of talks on CMMC compliance. There's a lot to this, but Tom's got a really good knack of just making this easy and digestible. So with that, Tom, I'm turning it over to you, and I'm excited to have you here today.
Great, and I'm excited to be here. And I do want to mention, as Nick said, this will be the first in a series of these webinars. So this is going to be a pretty general introduction. We're not going to dive into too much detail today, but we will further along get into more detail on each one of these topics. That being said, I did want to have a quick agenda so you know what to expect and what you should see today. First of all, I'm just going to go through a little bit of explanation of what the CMMC is. For those who don't know, that's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and this is put out by the Department of Defense. So it's a big acronym full of a ton of other acronyms and acronym soup, but it's something that needs to be basically explained, and then also we can go a little bit deeper into it. I also want to talk a little bit about where the source came from for the CMMC. Are there already standards that exist? The answer is yes. We'll talk a little bit about those. And then, of course, the levels that you're going to have to meet within the CMMC and making sure that you know what those are and what goes in, what is entailed into those. Again, we're going to do webinars that are deeper dives on those later, so this is just surface level, but this at least gets you a little bit of a taste of what's going on. Then we're going to talk about the assessment responsibility, what you're going to have to do, who's going to be doing it with you, and why that matters. And then we're going to give you some resources, and I want to open it up to Q&A. So my goal here is to have the Q&A be long enough that anyone that has good questions can ask them. We have a few that we're going to cover on our own, but please feel free to write down questions, ask questions at the end. As Nick said, I'm a lawyer. I'll talk for 5 straight hours without stopping if I'm given the chance. So the more somebody else asks questions, I can address their needs. So again, just to repeat, CMMC, that acronym, it's definitely a mouthful, is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And what happened was the Department of Defense began to realize that there was this CUI, this confidential unclassified information that was being used across their groupings, across their contractors, and they wanted to make sure that that was secure information. And in the past, they had rules in place, but they really weren't assessing those rules and making sure that people were actually following those rules. So they put out this new certification. They announced it last year for launch this year. The launch hasn't been as smooth as possible. As you can imagine, anytime a new piece of legislation or new piece of ruling comes down, people have to take some time to adjust to it and figure it out. And a lot of defense contractors said, whoa, this is a lot. You're adding a bunch of things to our requirements, so we want to make sure that we do it right. So there is some grace period to get it up and running. Right now, there are companies actually doing pre-assessments based on some of the things that we know about the CMMC, and some of the, in the resources page, we have some links to the actual websites that discuss this, but making sure that based on the knowledge we have today, can I go ahead and step forward a little bit and do certain things that set me up for success later on. So we at BitLift actually work with a number of Department of Defense contractors, mostly in the aerospace industry today, and they've actually gone out and brought in these outside assessors who are applying to be the official assessors, saying, here's what you need to have in place, here's what you need to know. And that's being done outside of our client base as well and other defense contractors I've talked to. So really, this covers the domains of cybersecurity, of which there are 17 specific domains. And it adds some requirements that simply didn't exist before. So there are a lot of things that already were in place, but this adds on top of those. And I'll talk about some of those key distinctions. But the point is, there's a lot that goes into cybersecurity. Just being a CMMC compliant doesn't necessarily mean that you're secure, but the steps that you're going to take to be secure are going to get you to where you're compliant. So most contractors, from what we can tell, are going to fall at either level 2 or level 3. Level 3 seems to be the most common from the people that I talk to. And there are 5 levels within that. The reason why I say that is hone in on those, figuring out where you're going to have to be and hone in on what you're going to have to do for those levels. A lot of people see the requirements and say, oh my gosh, there's so much there. And they don't realize that a lot of the stuff, especially at the top end, isn't going to pertain to them, and it doesn't matter. That's for people that are doing really, really high-end stuff. So making sure that you're not, getting overwhelmed. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't freak out. Address this in an ongoing fashion. Take your time. Ask questions throughout the process. One of the cool things about the defense contractor community, the ones that I talk to, is they're part of groups. They're part of industry networking groups. They can talk to others and get information. They can talk to vendors like us and get information. The key thing is take a deep breath, ask information, go to events, try to watch webinars like these as much as possible and learn what you can do. We've got blog posts and other things that you can tap into. And we want to make sure that that information gets spread, because it doesn't benefit anybody if you fail your audit and have to go back and spend a ton of money or have some other problems. The other thing, there are no experts today in CMMC. A lot of information is available. If anyone is telling you they're a CMMC expert, they're probably not. And the reason why they're probably not is it's a brand new thing. And while I don't 100% agree with Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours rule, nobody spent 10,000 hours with CMMC so far. So bear in mind that even when you're working with somebody who's helping you in this process, there's going to be things they have to research with you and learn with you. So don't worry if somebody doesn't know the answer. You can find the answer based on the information that's available. And I always encourage people to, we've got some attendees on this webinar. There are other people looking at this information, wanting to glean this. Do not be afraid to reach out to others and talk. Obviously, don't give anything away that's confidential or unique to you, but make sure that you do talk to people in your community and figure out what they're doing and what types of processes they're putting in place to address this. So going back a little bit, as far as what's the source of the CMMC, most of you who are in the defense contracting space already know NIST and DFARS pretty well. So this is really based upon those standards. There's one huge key difference. So a lot of people were already compliant with NIST and DFARS, and there were certain things that have been added into the CMMC. The biggest one is that you can't self-certify, whereas in the past you could. So now you actually have to go out to some kind of a third party. So what we've seen is actually a number of people who we've met who said, in the past, I told people I was doing X, Y, and Z, but we really weren't doing it, or we weren't doing it to the full extent we could have. Now you're going to have to. Someone's actually going to look at that, give you a rating, give you a score, make sure things are in place. They had to write down certain policies that they hadn't updated in a long time. So going through just your general security policies and your general plans overall and refreshing those, this is a great time to do it, doing it with the CMMC in mind. Most organizations, many organizations are already doing most of the things that are required under CMMC, or they're pretty close to doing them. So it's not like some of the feedback that I heard early on was that, oh my gosh, this is going to break my budget. I'm going to have to do a whole bunch of gymnastics to get this up and running. The reality is that's not true. A lot of organizations were already doing a good job of doing this, and we're meeting some of the requirements, and they simply have to tweak and tune a few things, upgrade a few things here and there. Will there be a budgetary spend? In a lot of cases, yes, there will be. That being said, there are some rumors that the Department of Defense will help with some of that budgetary requirement. So if there's things that you need to get compliant, if you've already got existing contracts or you're in the process of going after them, they don't want contractors to go out of business trying to be compliant. They want to make sure that those contractors still exist because it benefits them. And again, to reiterate, your goal here is not just to get compliant with the CMMC, but it's to be secure and say, hey, because I'm secure, I can show you and prove to you how I'm compliant with the CMMC. We deal a lot with other high compliance industries, and people always come to us and say, I want to meet this specific requirement. And that's really the wrong way to look at that. If you're really a cybersecurity mature organization, you've got plans in place and practices in place, you're using the right tools, you're doing the right things, you have your employees trained on the right things, and have a culture of security that makes you secure. No assurance that a breach won't happen, because even the most secure fortress can sometimes be breached. However, you're doing things that get you as close as possible to perfect. You're going to be compliant. You can generate the report then to show that afterwards. So again, 17 total domains. Here's this crazy, somewhat confusing pyramid. There are actually two prongs to the CMMC. The first is processes. The second is practices. The practices is a lot more in depth. There's a lot more teeth to that. Whereas with the processes, literally at level 1, security being performed, there's 0 required processes. Level 2 is 2, level 3 is 3, level 4 is 4, and level 5 is 5. So it's not simple by any means, but that one's at least easier to keep track of. When it comes to the practices, if you want to move from basic cyber hygiene to advanced progressive cyber hygiene, there's a number of practices that have to be in place. The numbers are actually pretty dramatic. At level 3, which I mentioned was the one that most people will fall in, it's well over 100 actual practices that have to be in place, some of which, again, you're probably already doing today, but some of which will be new. Whereas at the bottom, I believe it's 17. It's a much smaller number. So there is a big jump, and it can be somewhat costly. We have a couple blog posts specifically on this that dive deeper into what's entailed with the processes and practices. And because this is 101, I don't want to dive in too deep to those, but I'm always happy to talk with anyone who wants to know more. The essential thing is jump in where I would say start from the bottom, figure out where you actually have to fall based on the contracts you have, the type of work that you're doing, and figure out where you have to fall. And then make sure that that's what you're considering. Don't worry about reading the whole thing and saying, okay, level 5 is up here. Now, that being said, we believe, and a lot of people in the security space believe in an overall cybersecurity progression where you do go from basic cyber hygiene to advanced progressive cybersecurity and performed to optimized. So there is some benefit to moving all the way up the chain, but just know that for the requirements of the CMMC, you're probably going to be somewhere at level 1, 2, or 3. 2 and 3 will probably be most common. And if you're doing things that are higher than that, then yes, let's have a deeper conversation. If not, then make sure that you understand you're with a bunch of other people. You're not alone. There's a lot of other organizations falling into this same category. What's also interesting about this pyramid is there are 5 levels. So people ask sometimes, what does that really mean? Well, to me, it means if you want to be level 3, you have to be both managed in your processes and have good cyber hygiene. You can't say I'm level 3 here and level 2 here, so I'm level 3. It's not the highest score. It's where you actually fall. So the goal here is if you want to be level 3, be level 3 in both. If you're level 2, be level 2 in both. Don't try to be level 5 in one and level 1 in the other. You want to make sure that you're matching up where you sit on each category. This is a timeline that's out there. Obviously, it starts in Q2 of 2020, so we're a little bit behind as far as the C3PAOs, which are the assessors that are actually doing this. They haven't come online as quickly as possible. You can see where they were supposed to be certified and being selected in June, and we're past that. But there's more going into that. There are plans to have that up and running, but you can see the CMMC framework is out there. You can go find this. They are taking comments on it, and I think they'll probably update that and create some further guides, as you can see in the fall. And it's going to roll out to contractors. It was supposed to be this summer and then moving on into Q1 of 2021. So make sure that you keep an eye on this. This isn't end all be all. This is actually something we found on the web. There's a number of other sources that have similar calendars or have different calendars, but really this is the one that seemed to be most realistic. What I would say is make sure that as an organization you're planning for this, that you're not sitting back waiting for it to go live and then scrambling at that point in time. Now is the good time to assess where you sit and say, okay, let's read the framework. Let's have somebody on the team who's managing that project and make sure they know where the framework is. One of our clients, just to use an example, is a relatively small company. They do electrocircuitry. They're pretty high end. It's pretty cool to see what they can pull off. And they went ahead and did a number of pre-assessments and have actually gotten themselves into a position where other people are now asking them questions saying, hey, I saw what you guys are doing. We're completely at sea. What can you do? They'll say, hey, we don't know any more than you do, but they do because they've gone through the process. They assessed everything where they stood, and they did a lot of updating to their security systems in anticipation of this. So when it comes to the assessment responsibility, who's going to be doing this? We actually have it wrong here. It says third-party assessment organization, or 3PAO. The actual name is C3PAO. And no, it's not a Star Wars term. I don't know if that was intentional or not. Maybe somebody has a sense of humor at the Department of Defense. But the C is the certified. So again, the first sort of rollout of here's what it's going to look like to be an assessor, here's who's going to be able to do that, started in May, but that process is ongoing. They're a little bit behind. A number of people who are already FedRAMP 3PAOs are going to also be C3PAOs for the CMMC. So there are people that have gone through some process before to become an assessor. There is a pre-assessment process that you can do. You can get yourself prepared, and you can make sure that what you're doing is actually ramping you up to be CMMC compliant, or get you to the point where you're ready to be assessed as if you are CMMC compliant. And then they'll probably issue you a report. From my reading of it, that report will go out. They'll make some recommendations. You'll go and repair those recommendations and make some changes, go back to them, and they'll give a final, hey, you're at level 3. Congratulations, you've made it. Again, I want to reiterate, there is no self-certification. The reason why that's important is in the past, a lot of people have, I don't want to say not taken it seriously, but they were able to patch some holes with bubble gum, so to speak. And that's not going to be the case in the future. You want to make sure that you're actually doing the things that you say that you're doing here, because you can get dinged later, or you can lose contracts, you can be in trouble, and there are actually going to be assessors that are looking at this. So bitlift.com, obviously that's our website. We don't want this to be a sales pitch for us, but I've written some blogs there, and there are some videos. Please go look at those, use them as information. Just looking at a video doesn't mean you're going to get a phone call from a salesman or anything like that. We want our website to stand up not as a place where you get solicited, but as a place where you can go learn and get information. So please visit there. The Undersecretary of Defense also has a CMMC specific webpage that's there. That's a great resource. They've got some slideshows there. It's certainly got the framework published. It's got some Q&As and FAQs. It's a great place. It's where I get a lot of the information I use, which then leads to other things. Then you have this great website, cmmcaudit.org. It's got a great glossary, the terms. Like I said, there's a lot of acronym soup in this. If you know them all, awesome, good for you. If you don't, it's a good place to learn what those mean. And I'll tell you, not that I'm an expert in cybersecurity, but every day I come across a new acronym or something that I'm like, what in the world does that mean? And I go look it up. And then, of course, you can look at the FedRAMP requirements for who the 3PAOs are going to be and what's going on today. And we think that, a lot of those requirements will be the same. Obviously, that's a big assumption, but, we want to have it out there as something to do. In addition, as an organization, we do offer cybersecurity assessments. This is something that we can do for any organization and plunk in. It doesn't take very long. It does come with a cost, but the cost is pretty minimal. And basically what we do is go through a full discovery questionnaire. We have a discussion of your IT and OT architecture, and we'll actually monitor your network for 30 days, do some vulnerability scanning and things like that. Then we review and discuss what we saw and what was out there and where you can make changes, and we'll make recommendations. Nothing that we do is done based upon assumption or gut feel. We do it based on, here's the data that we saw, here's what we think is important for you to address today, and down the road, here's a plan that you should put in place. So please go and check that out. And with that, we can jump into a Q&A. I probably talked way too fast, so hopefully I didn't leave anybody's head spinning, but please jump in and have with any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think shorter is sometimes sweeter with everything going on with webinars, but I did want to circle back to something you said, and it had to do with the timeline on the C3PAOs. Are there anyone out there like actually doing these assessments, or like in the pre-process, like if they're not certified, how does a company engage with one of those now? Like, where do you even go to find where they're at, to find somebody on that path?
Yeah, that's a great question. Nobody is officially certified yet, to my knowledge. There are people in the process that have been sort of selected as you're going to be these. And obviously you can reach out to them. There are organizations that will do this. There are other existing 3PAOs that do other types of assessments too that you can reach out to and say, hey, do you work with CMMC? The other thing that I've seen in the market is there are some softwares being built. I know of one up in Pennsylvania. I've heard of another one out of the DC area that are building what are basically CMMC compliant pieces of software where you plug in your information, you say, here's what I'm doing, and it can help you assess where you sit today. I don't think they're end all be alls. Some of them are better than others, but the one out of Pennsylvania is really good. It's written by lawyers and cybersecurity people. So they're people who actually do this for a living. It's not just written by some software person who said, hey, I think I want to take a stab at this. These are people who actually know what they're talking about. But none of it's 100% certain today. So the best thing you can do is start having these conversations, read the website, read the information that's out there, and figure out where you think your holes are, and then maybe have a third party come in and look at it and say, yeah, I agree, you gotta ramp that up. As one example, we talked to an organization and they felt that they were lacking in a couple of tools. They went out and acquired those securities tools and started using them so that they were able to get closer to where they needed to be for the CMMC. And they did that in anticipation of this, knowing it was coming online. And so far, that's gone pretty well for them.
Great. And then something else with the timeline, I don't even know if you want to go back to slide 8, but you talked a little bit about, when these things need to take place. Is there like a cutoff date where, like, hey, if you don't have this certification, like, your contracts end? I know you mentioned there's kind of some gray area whether the government's coming out with, assistance to help organizations that have existing contracts or in the process. Are there kind of like some key dates here, like, hey, you should really start to have something like button up by this time frame? Or is this still really kind of a fluid or moving target based off of the government's communication to the public?
On October 4th, 2021, if you're not compliant, helicopters will show up at your place of operations, will arrest everyone. No, there's a lot of gray area. I think what's going to happen is there are a number of organizations already expressing, hey, this is a little bit much. I've got to make some big changes, and we're already doing this work. Let's not wreck that right now. And obviously, from a logistics standpoint, you don't want to be shutting down a bunch of contracts and making these big changes. That being said, you need to be in the process of addressing it. So if they come to you and say, hey, we need to know that you're CMMC compliant, and you haven't even thought about it, it's going to be a bad look and probably have some repercussions. If you're somebody that's saying, yeah, we're aware of it, we're in the process of getting an assessment, through that assessment, they raised some concerns, we're working on those, here's the steps we're taking, and you can document that somewhere or show reporting. That's going to be the steps to take. Obviously, there are going to be organizations that day one meet the requirements because they're already doing everything perfectly. If you're on the call, raise your hand if that's you. Just kidding. Nobody is doing cybersecurity perfectly, but there's some organizations that are a lot further along than others. So it'll run the gamut. But I think for the Department of Defense to run efficiently, they're going to have to give some wiggle room. That being said, I would start immediately. I would start really addressing this as quickly as possible. And for geeks like me that have been in this, it's not necessarily new information. I mean, people have been talking about this for pretty much the whole time I've been at BitLift, which is just over a year at this point.
Gotcha. And then another thing you mentioned too, which is, the NIST and DFARS standards. Does that give people a leg up who are already, pursuing those or have those compliance standards, or how does that factor into getting CMMC compliant?
That's a intellectually, being honest, probably yes on some level and no on a different level. And the reason why I say that is, look, if you were self-certifying and you were saying you were meeting those requirements, but you really weren't, you're probably not not in a good spot. If you were actually taking those requirements and saying, hey, we're going to meet them, we're going to do what we're supposed to do with NIST and DFARS, then yeah, you definitely have a good head start on CMMC. And again, I have yet to come across an organization that was slacking off and not doing anything. So it isn't like, and again, if you're on the call and you're one of the viewers and you're that organization and you have no cybersecurity, please raise your hand. Just kidding. But there are organizations that have taken this more seriously than others. And cybersecurity, there's a lot of confusion out there. That's why we stood up so much informational content on our website. There are other groups that have done similar things where they have learning libraries, because now is the time to learn about cybersecurity. You don't want to be caught spending way too much money to reach compliance and doing things you don't need to do, but you also don't want to be caught not doing the things that you have to do. And this isn't a go out and do the minimum. This is a do more than the minimum, make sure that we're compliant, and also that we have a plan for the future to continue to maintain security and compliance. So organizations that were doing that already had some of that operational mindset and somewhat of a culture of security. Organizations that are doing that are always a little bit better off.
Yeah, could you speak to that a little bit further too? I know you talked about, not just going after compliance, like, kind of like going after the law rather than going after like the intent behind the law for security. So how do organizations, I know this vary based across size for people who are doing work with the Department of Defense. But is there something to, modifying or speaking into the culture of organizations for cybersecurity, not just to meet these compliance standards, but to really strengthen their organization? Because to be honest, like what's at stake, right? Is it military secrets, or is it classified information, or these, as it relates to manufacturers, like intellectual property that has potentially could be stolen from them to make it, kind of hit closer to home. How do you talk about that culture with the people and prospects that you're talking with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what I'll start with is some of the information you mentioned at the end. Obviously, there's Department of Defense related, the CUI that we talked about, that information. Very important from a national security interest to protect that. Very important from a business standpoint to protect that, and a governmental standpoint to protect that. Beyond that, most organizations do have their own intellectual property, things they do that are unique, that are really the bread and butter of their business, that they need those trade secrets, they need those, patented things, they need, even trademarks that they may have. How am I protecting that? And cybersecurity fits into all of that. And it's with some of the new laws, for instance, passed in China, where things are going on overseas and internationally. There's also stuff, cybersecurity laws changing here in the United States. Who's liable for what? Who gets, when something gets exposed, whose problem is it? Across an organization, I think the first step you need to say is, let's put cybersecurity up there as a business risk and the business project that we have, and it's got to have some importance to it. A lot of times I see cybersecurity being lumped in as simply an IT project. It's not. It goes across the entire business. And what you meant, the word culture, and you use it, I've used it, is really, really important. Having your employees take it seriously. I always go back to my wife's company as an example. She works for a big publicly traded employee benefits company, and they do at least once a month some kind of corporate training on cybersecurity and how to secure things, encrypted emails, whatever it is. They're screensavers on all their computers. She works out of the home, and she has, I think, 3 screens. Every single one of them has a screensaver that's related to cybersecurity and security training. It's probably overkill, but she never worked in an environment like that. And with what I do every day, obviously I am concerned with it. I've sat in, and they have pretty good stuff. Some things I laugh at. But what they've done is create a culture where everybody there is not flippant about what they do. Everyone there protects data. Everyone there takes it incredibly seriously. And in fact, as part of their employee handbook, they can get fired for not doing it. Or at least punished. There's a sliding scale, or maybe there's an escalating scale of, hey, you did it once, no big deal. Let's educate you. You did it twice. Now you're suspended. You did it 3 times. You're out. Building a culture like that, but also building a culture that you and I have talked about this, where we say it's not about the fear tactics. It's not about, oh my gosh, North Korea is spying on you. What are they doing? You have to frame it as, to do business, we have to be secure. And the analogy you and I have been using is that it's like having children. You're going to get in your car every day, and you're going to drive to work. You're going to drive your children places. And driving is insanely dangerous and stupid. I mean, driving is, I'm going to get hit by somebody else, a drunk driver, a bad driver. I might hit something. A tree could fall on the road. A kid could throw a rock from a highway bridge. There's 100 things that could go wrong, but I still have to do it because I need to go out to the store. I need to go to work. I need to get my kids, to school and practices and all that. But it doesn't mean you get in a car with no seatbelt, don't steer, have loud music playing. You keep your car really secure. With smaller children, you put them in car seats and lock them in. That's the same kind of environment. Treat your secrets like the kid. Put it in the proper car seat. Put it in the proper place where it needs to go. Secure it. And make sure that everyone understands that that's the key. So if you're not the one driving the car, it's your husband or your cousin or your aunt or uncle. They know, hey, your kids are in that car seat. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change just because it's a different driver. So everybody has that mindset. And I always take the approach of a cybersecurity maturity for an organization. We know that day one, you're probably not perfect. Some organizations are better off than others. But the only way to really get better at it is to set a plan and say, over the next 18 months, we're going to do this. Over the next 5 years, we're going to do this. And there are cybersecurity operations maturity models available that I use from time to time. We've not, as a company, done one, but we use some third-party ones that we've found to be pretty effective that we can give to people and say, check this out, put this plan in place, assess where you are today, and you'll improve. That's the goal, is doing that. Once you've hit that maturity level in cybersecurity, chances are you're going to be compliant, and you're going to be able to get the reporting that says, here's how I'm compliant. There you go. And you're going to know you're doing it. You're also going to feel better about your cybersecurity in general.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Well, I know we're at 30 minutes, so we'll wrap up here. I think there's plenty of opportunity to connect further on this, and I know we have some more material already out on our website, as well as some more webinars we're going to be doing here. I just want to direct you, we will put the links that you saw in this presentation available on this Bright Talk channel, so you can come back to this and click those. So if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap here, Tom, I appreciate your talking about this today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was fun, and I hope everyone got something out of it. Please come back for the other ones. They'll be more detailed. They'll probably be a little bit longer. I really thank you for coming. I appreciate the time, especially when I know people are probably sick of webinars.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.